Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chapter Select, a seasonal podcast where we bounce back and forth between a series of games exploring their evolution, design, and legacy. I am one of your hosts, Max Roberts, and I'm joined, as always, by Logan Moore. Hi, Logan.
Hi. I didn't mention this before we went live, but I think somebody's practicing a recorder near me today. So if you hear any recorder sounds being played, I'm sorry. I live in between school children, so
Oh my
so
gosh.
that should be fun.
All right, well, maybe they can play some God of War music, and it'll just seamlessly blend into the background.
The recorder, a classic Greek instrument.
Yes, Kratos' favorite instrument, actually, famously. And we're not alone this week. Joining us for this special episode on God of War 2 is Grant Huff. Grant, welcome to the show.
What's up, fellas? Kind of a fun fact. I only got through 2 songs on the recorder in elementary school. So
Was one of them hot cross buns, I would assume?
yes, it was. That was the first one, and then I got like the second belt, and then I never practiced again, and I couldn't pass the third test.
I think I just took the recorder and used it as a wand or a weapon. I don't even think I played the recorder properly. I think I just swung it at people as a weapon.
It's very strange that teaching the recorder to elementary school kids is so common across the country. That seems like a very strange thing to be part of the standard grade school curriculum. Let's teach these kids about music. Oh, what instrument? Oh, we'll use this recorder. I guess it's easy to use, but anyway.
It's got 5 buttons. That's all you need.
And it's plastic. It's very cheap.
You can probably make them for 85 cents a pop or something.
Yeah. And you know what? Maybe they grow up and they become Insane in the Rain. And maybe they have covers of songs from God of War 2, which is the topic of today's episode. Season 2 is all about God of War. And last episode was all about Ascension. And so now we are back over on the front end of the release order of this series with God of War 2. Originally came out for the PS2, March 13th, 2007. It'd later be released, remastered for the PlayStation 3 and the Vita, paired actually with God of War 1. So that was November 17th, 2009 for the PS3, and then May 6th, 2014 for the Vita. It was developed, of course, by Santa Monica Studio, and it was directed by one Cory Barlog, who would... I learned a lot about Cory this week. We'll talk about that more later, but this was Cory's directorial debut. It was produced by Steve Caterson. Combat, Eric Williams, who we've mentioned in the past, is now directing God of War Ragnarok. There's Derek Daniels, who I just found out was born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is both where Logan and myself are from. And there's Jason McDonald, who's still there. Derek is still there. Eric obviously is still there. And then there's Adam Poole. I didn't look up if Adam was still there or not. Maybe he is. And then the music, all God of War alum. I was talking to Grant before the show. I'm not going to screw this one up. Gerard Mariano. I was very nervous. I was very nervous about this one. Ron Fish, Mike Reagan, and Chris Velasco. So not as long, an extensive cast of composers, but these are all God of War alum. And then it got a Metacritic score of 93 out of 100, which I don't know if that's the second highest. It's definitely one of the highest God of War.
I think
scores.
It's the second highest, only behind the reboot. The reboot sits at, I don't know if we need to break this all down because we can do it. We'll do it episode by episode.
But it's definitely one of the highest God of War. And if that is the case, both Cory Barlog games sit at the top.
I guess I should jump in. The original has a 94, so we're already wrong on that front. 2 episodes ago, we had one that was higher. So
it's so hard to keep it all track.
I know,
but I wanted to kind of see what all of our experiences with this one were in particular, and I want to kick it off to you, Grant, first. Did you play God of War 2 before this show?
I did. Played it on PS2, a long time ago, and I remember like little tidbits of it, but honestly forgot most of the game. I mean, I was a kid, probably shouldn't have been playing it in the first place because you see plenty of boobs in this game, apparently, that I forgot about. But yeah, I played it back as a kid, thought it was awesome back then. I mean, I had to be like 11-year-old.
Oh my
Every
gosh.
11-year-old play this game probably thought it was awesome, never thought about it too much. But revisiting now, I'll talk about it more later, I guess.
We will. Logan, what about you?
Same thing that I talked about with the first one, how I hadn't played the first or second one until the remastered PS3 collection came out. I'm pretty sure I played both 1 and 2 like back to back pretty quickly. Again, we could look this up with my trophies again if we wanted to. Really, we don't need to. But I'm pretty sure like when I got that collection, I played them both back to back pretty quickly. So I had played this before, but it again has been probably 7, 8, 9, 10 years at this point. So yeah, it was interesting going back to this one, especially since like we said, this is like Cory Barlog's become practically a household name if you pay any sort of close attention to the video game industry over the past 5 years, or I guess more specifically the past 3. So it was interesting going back and seeing the one that he was synonymous with before the reboot came out a couple of years ago. And yeah, one quick thing I wanted to bring up, kind of backpedaling just a little bit because we mentioned the release date and how this game came out in March 2007, and then in 2009 they came out with that PS3 remaster. How quickly do you think they greenlit a PS3 version of this game? And I'm sure that's something we could look into and maybe find out. But to my knowledge, also, I mean, the bigger thing here, and you can tell me you can both tell me if I'm wrong. I really remember that God of War 1 and 2 HD remaster being like one of the first real remasters that ever came out, to my knowledge. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't remember that being a thing before that released. And obviously this came out in 2007, so the PS3 was already out, and this game came out 5 to 6 months after it launched. So that was kind of a weird thing that it was on old hardware, even though the PS3 was already available. But then it obviously came to the system 2 years later. Anyway, yeah. I guess my question is, I wonder how quickly Sony was like, crap, this game is one of the best games of the year, and it's on our old hardware. We need to get this on our new hardware stat. Let's do that.
I think they greenlit it pretty quick because clearly by the end of this game, like, this was set up to lead into God of War 3.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, this was famously one of the PS2 swan songs. They've openly talked about how they wanted to put it on PS3 at first, but Shuhei Yoshida made the call to make sure it was a PS2 game. They didn't want to ignore their massive install base. And so I think greenlighting a sequel, or I'm sorry, the remaster to like help lead into the sequel was a very quick and obvious thing for them. And it was done by Bluepoint, which, to slightly date the podcast, was recently acquired by Sony as now a first-party studio. So even though it was second-party then, now it's kind of come full circle now with them being a first-party team now.
Am I right that like that was one of the first HD remasters of the time? Because HD gaming wasn't a thing until 360 and PS3.
Yeah. I can't think of any other ones other than like the Metal Gear Solid HD collection, but I mean, I think that was even after God of War remasters.
It was one of the first proper HD. There was Resident Evil on the GameCube, which was a remake of the first one from the PlayStation. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't HD.
But yeah. It wasn't really it was kind of a full-blown remake in some ways, that Resident Evil 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Compared to the first one.
Yeah, because this one was just kind of up-res, looked prettier, it wasn't a remake.
Running at 60. I mean,
this really started the trend of the remasters.
Yeah, they did that a lot on the PS3. Before I talk about my own little story with God of War 2, I decided to pull up your trophies again, Logan.
You did do it.
You played God of War on the PS3 for the first time in June of 2014, and it looks like you played God of War 2 in April of 2015. So you waited almost a year to play the sequel. Interesting. At least according to when these trophies were synced.
When did God of War 3 would have been out already, for sure?
Yes, God of War 3 was definitely out by then.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I don't remember. See, I thought for sure I played these in high school, not college. That's kind of baffling.
You may have just on the PS2. Possibly.
No, I never did. I know that for certain.
Well, I definitely played it on PS2. Actually, God of War 2 was like one of the first rated M games I bought when I turned 17. I turned 17, went into GameStop and bought God of War 2, Chains of Olympus, and Ghost of Sparta. That was my 17th birthday. Was just a God of War. And I also bought Animal Crossing City Folk the same day. So, I really had a diverse range there.
I was going to say, that's a weird collection of games to buy.
Mm-hmm. It was quite the shopping trip. And then I actually came back the next day because the disc was scratched for God of War 2 and it wasn't working. So they replaced it, and they had a copy of the special features DVD that was included with the game. They threw that in for me. So that was when I played God of War 2 for the first time. And then I replayed it back in 2018, right before the reboot, the sequel reboot, reimagining, however you want to call it, came out. I played through the first core 3 games then. So, but yeah, I've played it on PS2 and PS3 now for the first time. And I know, Logan, you continued to play on PS Now through the power of the cloud.
Yes.
However
it
that
still
works.
continues to, I'll continue to update every time it continues to work very well for me. Like, I continue to be very impressed in a general sense. Like, it's better than I thought it would be, to be totally honest. So
that's good.
I'm surprised because every time I've tried it, it's been bad.
And the only time I've tried it was like in the beta at the beginning. So I'm not a very good.
Don't get me wrong. It has moments where it slows down, but it's never super terrible. It's just like it gets really framey for a little bit. And considering most games now, I can't even play Breath of the Wild on my Switch without it dipping to 15 frames every now and then. So like that's just something I'm used to in a general sense, seeing frame dips. So like it's not that huge of a deal.
How did you play it this time around, Grant?
I got the remastered collection on PS3. If I knew before I purchased it was on Vita, I would have bought it on Vita because I haven't played a Vita game in years, and that sounds fun to me.
Our other friend, ironically, also named Grant, he recently played God of War 1 on the Vita, and it sounded like it was a bit of a rough ride. So maybe you should...
Oh, maybe it was good I avoided that.
He did not enjoy that at all. Based on what he told us.
Maybe you dodged a bullet there.
Yeah, maybe.
So before we dive into kind of the general structure and just our usual talking points in the game, I wanted to hit on Cory Barlog first because he is synonymous with not just the new God of War and the direction it's going, but, God of War 2 as well. And it was his directorial debut, which, coming from lead animator to director was kind of an interesting jump. That actually also happens with Stig from God of War 2 to God of War 3, which is interesting in and of itself. But I was looking around online this week, kind of getting ready for the show and just learning and reading about Cory and stuff. And he is way more involved with God of War than normal. Actually, quite surprisingly so. He, while he left shortly a few months into God of War 3's development to go off and work on a Mad Max game and different things like that and consulting, he helped to write the story for Chains of Olympus, and he wrote the story for Ghost of Sparta, and he outlined the story of God of War 3. He's essentially actually been the narrative guide for Kratos, not just in 2 in 2018. So I thought that was interesting. But I was curious what you two thought of, the direction of this game coming from David Jaffe and the series creator to handing off to a new person. I mean, really, God of War has a different director every time, in the rare exception of God of War 2 in 2018. So what did you think of Cory's debut here, and I guess his Kratos' sequel outing?
So I was very vocal on our God of War episode that I didn't like that game really that much going back to it. And the one thing I really didn't like more than anything was the story. I thought the story was really flat, and I thought that the characters were not great as well. That's totally... my feelings are totally different with God of War 2. I think the brunt of who Kratos is like a character is more fully explored in this game compared to the first one. The first one, he's just yelly revenge man, and he's basically still that in this game. But they get into
Athena!
They get into it a little bit deeper with him this time, and they start to more fully explain a lot of things that are going on in this world to the point that you care a little bit more. Because last time in the first game, that was the thing that I never really clicked with that game. When we went back to it, is that it was very much a story with Kratos at the center, but he was kind of he kind of influenced everything around him. And this game, I feel like, shows that there is a lot more larger things going on in this world outside of just him. And so the game is very much more about things that are happening in the Greek world and how he slots into that, rather than the reverse with the first game, which felt more like, here's Kratos and he's playing in this sandbox that is the Greek world, if that makes any sense. And I like that a lot more. I like that he feels less like the person, and he just feels like a player within this world, and he's kind of uprooting these structures and the hierarchy of power and stuff like that. Hierarchy of power. That's a rock phrase.
Oh my goodness.
From his Black Adam trailers. Anyway, I don't know. I think the story is really good in this game, and I think this game does a better job of fleshing out this world, fleshing out Kratos in some more interesting ways. Probably, I mean, again, we'll see as we move forward with the series, which is why we're playing through all of these. But I really think that he gets more time to shine in this game, probably compared to any other game other than the 2018 reboot. So yeah, I didn't hate him in this game necessarily, because he doesn't come off as... he definitely comes off as a huge D-bag a lot of times still. I mean, the opening sequence of the game, he's just like, I'm going to jump out of the sky and go destroy this town because I'm pissed off. And so he's not a great dude, but... better than the last time around, I thought.
Grant, what about you?
I kind of agree. I mean, I think the first game, from what I can remember, I don't remember Kratos having any redeeming qualities at all. Whereas this one, they flesh out his story a little bit bigger. He had a good point. He kind of gets put into like the Greek mythology, and he kind of has his place in time in that. And with all that stuff is pretty cool and fleshed out, and that's neat, but I still kind of feel like everyone in this game doesn't have many redeeming qualities. I didn't leave the game thinking like, oh man, like that was not thought-provoking. This is a game from 2007. Games back then weren't very thought-provoking, but it was just one of those experiences where I was like, I'm gonna kind of forget about a lot of these characters, whereas in the 2018 reboot, I feel like that narrative hit me a lot more strongly, and it's something I remember as one of the best stories told in a video game, whereas this one, I just remember like Kratos and the gods are all selfish for a lot of the needs that they think they need to have justified, but maybe I'm just reading a little too deep to a game released on PS2,
Yeah, the world just felt richer, It just, the first game really was Ares. Like Ares did me wrong. I have to, and so everything just fits under that umbrella of Ares. And this just felt like the whole Greek pantheon opened up, and it felt like a world instead of just go kill Ares. It left a single-minded focus, and while Kratos has a single drive pushing him forward, just everything happening around him and what he goes through just was more dynamic and richer for him to actually move and push his own narrative through.
I think the thing that makes this story a lot more satisfying to me is Zeus as the bad guy, because Zeus screws Kratos over, and you can kind of see that Kratos gets screwed over, and you can not necessarily like empathize with them, but you have a stronger desire to go fight Zeus because of what he does to you in the opening hours of the game. Ares as a bad guy in the first game never worked for me, because yeah, he does betray Kratos and screw him over and lead him killing his family and stuff, but it's totally a story where Kratos makes a deal with the devil, and then later on he doesn't like the deal that he made, and it's like, well, you made a deal with a blood-hungry, the god of war. Like, of course this wasn't going to turn out in your favor. So I never really liked the conflict of the first game, because I don't feel like Ares is a super bad. I feel like Kratos's plight in that game is self-inflicted. This game, it's somewhat self-inflicted because he's still a huge D-bag, and like I said, and he's running around and messing up the Greek world. But at the same time, Zeus is doing what he's doing to him because he's trying to keep his power. He's trying to put Kratos' power in check, and he's trying to make sure that he is the one staying on top. And so he's more compelling as a villain because of that, I think.
Yeah, it's not just Zeus either. This game actually has something called boss fights, which I think we'll talk about mechanically, I think, a bit more with gameplay, but narratively focused, Kratos is going to the edge of the world, is kind of like this narrative pitch to find the sisters of fate, and it does feel like you go a great distance and you're trudging forward and pushing through obstacle after obstacle. Not only, Theseus or Perseus or even Icarus, like other just kind of Greek icons. You even tie in this god of war lore with like bringing the barbarian back kind of almost halfway through, which is this reminder of the deal you made with Ares. And they build and tie and just kind of weave God of War and Greek lore together to make this world feel even better. And I liked that push of always going forward. It wasn't like the first game where you're going back and forth between environments, like you're in Athens and then you go to the desert and then you leave the desert and you come back. This was always forward. There was never backtracking, and it kept pushing Kratos further and further down this path of taking down the god of Olympus. I like that. I like that push.
I will say some of the characters they throw in show up kind of out of nowhere. That's the one thing about this game where it's just like, wait, why the heck are you here?
Like who?
Icarus just like crawls out from under a bridge and he's like, Ghost of Sparta. It's like, what are you hanging out on this bridge for, bro? Like, I know he's trying to go to see the fates or whatever. But a lot of people just show up places. It's like, oh, okay, I guess this person's here. Even his soldier he finds at the end, how does he get all the way there? Like, I know they kind of try to explain it, but
well, he was ahead of Kratos in the bog.
But how does Kratos had to get wings of Icarus to like fly across that large. Yeah, how does he get there? Like, what? Like, there's a lot of things like that where people just show up and you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is happening. Which is fine. It's a video game. Like, I don't need it to make total continuity sense like that all the time. But yeah, I thought that was funny.
Yeah. The, kind of speaking of that soldier, one of the things I love when a video game does is when they do tie that gameplay and narrative together, and they put the story in your hands on the controller. And there were a couple of points in this game where they specifically do that, not only just the push to get to the edge of the world and you're going through the island, that's kind of the whole game, but there's that fight with the soldier, and it's this great silhouette 2D slash fight, and then you burst out, and Kratos realizes that it's one of his Spartans, and why is Sparta undefended and all this stuff, and that leads to a good reveal. But then also in the beginning of the game, where the game opens just killer. It's this killer sweet set piece opening of fighting this giant Colossus statue thing. But then the sword of Olympus comes down, and you mechanically, you're holding the circle button or whatever, but you're pouring all of your godly power into the sword, and that felt really smart to me as a way to make a player give up all of the power that they got from the previous game, instead of Samus getting zapped by electricity and she loses all her powers, or just a character starting over, like, my stuff's over there, or I left it at home, so I gotta start over. It felt cool to sacrifice that and then have Zeus come down and betray you and stab you in the gut and all that kind of stuff.
I will say, I thought that a lot of the concepts they had in this game were super cool to me. I was going to bring up that too, about him literally getting like his powers drained into the sword from Zeus. That was something cool to me, but I don't know. For some reason with me, with a lot of these older games, at times I feel like the execution's just not there, or maybe they didn't age as well just from a narrative standpoint. I don't know why this. Maybe it's just I told myself for so long that, like, man, Kratos is kind of a boring character. Going back to this game, it's hard to look past some of the stuff. But I will say that, like, the whole concept of the original God of War series was so cool to me. But going back to it now, I don't know why. I just feel like the execution of it wasn't there. Maybe I'm just comparing it to the 2018 reboot too much, because that's one game I feel like it's close enough to a perfect game that I can say it's a perfect game, But yeah, I don't know why I feel that way.
I think it's just, I think Logan and I will get into this when we do the 2018 God of War focused episode, but I think it's a testament, to just how far they pushed that particular game, like reimagining it for PS4 and keeping everything else. Like, they easily could have just said, scratch all of this, it's done, here's a new God of War. But they kept it all, and it's relevant. And I think that this game, I think, is one of those games in particular, out of, the whole series leading into the reboot. Like, this stuff, I don't know, I really like reminding myself that this stuff happens to the Kratos we play as in the Norse realm. Like, this, when he stabs that soldier, for example, and, like, you see the shock and sadness on his face, for as much as Kratos on a PS2 was giving at the time. And my brain goes to, he named Atreus after a fellow Spartan, not that particular one, but they use this stuff to make Kratos better in the future. And I don't know, I just like being reminded of that and thinking it puts a lot of the stuff, his fears and frustrations and rules, into context. And I think this game in particular is one of those stronger examples. By the end of the game, he finds out for sure that Zeus is his father. And it's like, well, no wonder he's really not into this whole God thing.
I do have to say that reveal this time around felt way more weak than I remember it. It just kind of comes out of left field.
It's just Athena on her deathbed.
Yeah, they don't really hint at it, or there's no foreshadowing to it whatsoever, other than Zeus really saying, "My son." He says that a couple times, but like, you figured he's just saying that just because he's like an old man. So they don't really foreshadow it, and then she gets stabbed. She's like, "Oh, Kratos, Zeus is your dad." Oh. It's like, well, that's okay, but that's kind of a random thing. I feel like they could have done more with that if they would have maybe... actually, I don't know that, because I can't remember how God of War 3 plays out exactly, and we will get to that point where I do remember how it plays out exactly once we play it. But yeah, as far as this game goes, I feel like if they would have maybe done a little bit more with it earlier, And that would have been cool. Speaking of what you said though before about how like certain things affect Kratos and that stuff is like taken with him moving forward. One of my favorite things about this game, and maybe it's just a very it's I don't want to say it's a subtle thing, but it's a defining feature of his character, is him getting stabbed in the gut. I love that he always has that giant scar and it never goes away, even in the new ones. Like, I always see that. I'm like, ooh, God of War 2, Zeus, stab this man right there. I love that that's so prominent and it's such a part of his character moving forward, that moment. And just the entire arc of this game, like what he has to do in the wake of that to get back to that moment and turn the tables on Zeus. So like this whole game centers around that moment and then him getting back to that moment via time travel, which is a wacky thing. The very strange thing.
Forgot about the time travel.
Yeah, they might do it when we were talking about Ragnarok. I mean, we don't need to get too deep into the Ragnarok stuff, but basically there are theories that Ragnarok is going to involve time travel. And I know some people have been like, that's really weird. It's like, well, it's also kind of normal because this has happened before.
Already happened. Yeah.
It's quite common for Kratos, actually.
So if they do time travel in Ragnarok, it's going to all kind of come full circle in a funny sort of way. Although it'll be very... I don't know how they'll do it. I don't know if he's just going to pull a thread out of his back pocket and be like, don't worry, son, I got this thread here. we can go
hold on to this one. The end of this game, though, is really super well paced. I love it. I think it has this great narrative buildup of you finally meet the sisters and fight them, and then you fight the bigger sister, and then it's now you have the thread and you time travel back and you fight Zeus, which is its own kind of fight here. And then instead of the game ending there, which it totally could have just stopped, like with Zeus flying away and Athena dying, and like, we'll get revenge. Instead, they're like, nope, go back to the temple, time travel all the way back to the Titan War and bring them all forward. However that works.
I was going to say, I don't really know how he does that. He just says, come Gaia with me. And then,
yes.
It's like, what?
Superpowers.
So mechanically, like, time travel logic or whatever, let's just scratch that. But he brings them back, and then, that famous climbing up Mount Olympus, I bring the destruction of Olympus, like Zeus, oh my gosh. And then it just says the end, the beginning of the end, and it's...
The end begins.
The end begins, thank you. How cool of an ending. I feel like that is a dope ending that just definitely leaves the player wanting more. But Grant, what did you think of the end of this? How does it make you feel?
I totally forgot that going back, I think it's even cooler knowing the beginning of God of War 3, that it's like if you go back to, I just watched a walkthrough of God of War 3, it literally starts with him saying that, like, I bring the destruction to whatever. Like, it literally starts from that second. I just thought that was so cool that they did that. Before we move on there, I just had to say this. 2 things. I thought it was hilarious that Athena was just like, Kratos, he's your dad. Don't kill him. All the gods kill their dad. And he's like, no. And then he's just like, I'm going to kill him anyway. And then it just kind of moves on.
Yes.
And then when he moves back in time, or he goes back in time, and then Zeus sees him, and he's just like, oh, I guess that's what happened. Like, he just knows immediately. I just thought that was funny.
The thing
just like, how?
The other part about the time travel mechanic that I would like to bring up is that he can only use his own thread, right, to go throughout his own life.
Yes.
And then
how does he?
And then he shows up like back with long time ago, and he's like, I'm here now. What's up? And then Gaia's like, oh, we've been waiting for you, huh? Like,
how did Gaia know?
She should have turned around and been like, what the heck is this guy doing here? Smack. Yeah, I don't know. A lot of strange things that don't really make a whole lot of sense, but sure, just shrug your shoulders and move on.
But it's very fun.
Yeah. Athena
It's
getting
cool.
stabbed is also
it's
pretty
awesome.
dumb, if I'm being honest. Or her getting stabbed the way that she does, I guess I should say.
Like trying to push the sword out of the way.
Yeah, she just kind of like, I don't know. It doesn't even look like he's about to stab Zeus exactly, and she just kind of jumps in and I don't know. It just looks funny in the cutscene, but anywho.
Speaking of getting stabbed, let's talk about the gameplay. The real, again, core, of these games is how the combat feels. It's, you're following this up. It's a sequel to a big new IP. It's the end of the PS2. The PS3 is already out at this point, like announced and out. Actually not too dissimilar to other stuff, other big games that like happened between the PS3 and the PS4. God of War Ascension was a PS3 swan song, probably could have been on PS4. What did you think of the follow-up here? Like, is this does it elevate the God of War gameplay to you, Logan, or does it just more of the same, and the same is good enough?
I think it's a lot better. I think it's a lot better even than Ascension, which we played previously. Coming off from Ascension to this, it felt vastly better to play this game. Mainly because I like a lot of the magic powers. They give you way more. I think the chains feel very fluid and responsive in this game. The combos that you do with them throughout the 3 games we've played are never very different. But there's a certain heft to them in this one that I felt more so than, especially last time around with Ascension. It's very similar to God of War, obviously. But yeah, I think this is the most refined and polished. Like last time around, on our last 2 episodes, I remember I was having some like little niggles here and there and talking about some things that bothered me about the combat with each. I really didn't have any sort of strange problems in this one, other than like really, really nitty gritty stuff that's even hard for me to like explain. Like I don't know, just like timing and how things work sometimes. Didn't make much sense. Like I would die in strange instances where like my character was clearly not dead. Like a Medusa froze me and then somebody blew me up, but like I also shook out of it at the exact same second that somebody attacked me.
Oh yeah.
And my character model didn't blow up, but it still gave me a "you're dead" screen. It's like, well, that's kind of weird. But that's like some very, very nitty gritty stuff that I don't even know how to. Yeah, like that's not super common. In a general sense, yeah, I think it feels way better. I like I said, I like the different magic attacks quite a bit as well. The bow feels way better than the lightning did. The change to the lightning attack. I know last time it was like was it the Poseidon attack in the first game? And I know you.
Yeah.
And they replaced that sort of with the Atlas smash the ground thing. So it's all pretty basic, but I think it feels better in larger combat situations.
Grant, how did this game feel so many years later, from 11-year-old Grant playing a game he probably shouldn't have been playing to now?
I forgot how fun like these PS2 era like hack and slash games are. I mean, I had some of the same instances where I think it was just like timing of when you need to block something. I know there's just some attacks when I think when like you do a heavy attack, you're not able to roll out of it, and there's just some weird timing instances where I'm like I pressed evade, but he didn't evade, But for the most part, like I just had a blast every time I had a combat encounter, except for like the Medusa heads. I hated those things because they're an instant kill, which sucked. But for the most part, I feel like QuickTime events get a bad rap, but even with the QuickTime events, I had a blast with all of them. All the different moves you get were fun to use. I know a lot of times in these games, you'll find one move that you're like, oh, this is it. This is all I'm going to use the rest of the game. I found myself really using everything I had, other than the two other weapons, like I forgot what it was called, like the giant hammer and then the spear. The Chaos Blades were just too fun to use. That's all I wanted to use the entire game. So for the most part, combat holds up in a PS2 game.
Yeah, it's a continuing testament to just how rock solid the idea and design of the Blades of Chaos are. Right? They are some of the best weapons in video games, and the fact that 2017, so what is that, 14 years ago? I mean, we're almost at next year, I guess. Actually, just in a few months will be the 15-year anniversary of this game, and it's awesome just how that stuff holds up. I really enjoyed the focus on trying to expand that arsenal, though, with the spear and the hammer. And I thought it was interesting that the first bit of magic was essentially an alternate weapon, the bow, instead of being actual magic like you get later. So I liked that they tried to expand upon it beyond just giving you a sword in like the back quarter of the first game, but also didn't try to force you to use those alternate weapons like they do in Ascension, where Ascension puts those 5 different classes of weapons on you and typically forces you to use them in certain scenarios. So I like that. And the new L1 circle attack where you like Kratos goes sideways and like stabs the blades back and forth, that was a good move. That's just really good.
How often did you guys switch from the blades to other weapons?
Pretty rarely.
I'd say it was like 95% me sticking to the blades.
I did switch to the hammer in the push toward the loom, but that's because the guide I was using for the platinum recommended it to get to the bottom in 10 minutes to like really hit hard. But for the most part,
I know what you're talking about.
I was using just the blades just because they're so good. It's awesome.
I think I switched to the hammer. Is it a hammer?
There's the barbarian hammer, which is
that's what it
pretty
was.
cool that you take the guy who arguably kickstarted this whole thing. You take his weapon from him, and then there's the purple spear that you get from the. It's not a fawn. I mean, I guess it technically is, but the guy that was riding the bird creature at the beginning, and he crashes onto the island, and you take his spear from him.
Yeah, I know there's during the game I'd use like the Medusa head, turn them to stone, and then the hammer would basically break them, but that's really the only time I'd use it.
I appreciated the effort here. This felt like a good balance of offering options, but knowing what they've got and not ignoring it like they eventually would end up doing in Ascension. What about the puzzles? So obviously it's not just combat. There are also some puzzly elements. It's a character action game from the mid 2000s. You just don't have it without puzzles. I kind of had 2 notes in particular, but the first one was just how puzzles impact the physical world. Instead of just pushing boxes around or shifting weights or whatever, there was some sort of consequence to the real world, whether that was pushing shields to block the eyes to lower the force field, which when were there force fields in Greek myth, or using the trees or slowing down the time. I mean, even when you get the amulet for the first time, you have to like destroy the statue of the Sisters of Fate, and that breaks the glass, and then she taunts you from. So there's just, I thought that was interesting how puzzles were more tied into the world itself instead of just being almost feeling out of place being a puzzle. But what did you think about in this game, Grant?
So for the most part, I enjoyed most of the puzzles. I forgot how many there were in the game. There was most of them. I was like, I thought that they were pretty clever, I guess. I know the one where you're in the chamber where the water is rotating around the chamber after you break through a couple walls. And it took me a little while to realize you have to put the body on the water and then it rotates all the way around and then you put it on the other weight. It took me a little bit to understand that. And for the most part, most of the puzzles just kind of clicked after a while. There were a couple that kind of missed me a little bit that I'm not ashamed to say I looked up a walkthrough. I know the one I'm thinking of is when you had to grab one of the statues that holds the puzzle or the shield, and you had to put it on a raised platform and apparently kick it off. It's the only time you do that in the game. That I had no idea you're able to do that. So I was like, oh, I wish they told me that. So that was the only one I really was like, all right, I'm just looking this up. But for the most part, all the puzzles were pretty good.
The bell puzzle at the end, I don't know what it was. I clearly didn't have too much trouble the last 2 times I played this game, but I was like, how does this puzzle work? My brain could not comprehend. I thought I had to ring the bell, slow time, and then move it to ring the other bell. No, I did. I have to slow down time and then walk over and just hit it myself. I couldn't get out of my head. Couldn't use the battering ram. That felt way too unclear to me. What about you, Logan?
There were a couple that were pretty obtuse to me. Some of the ones that are coming to mind right now. The one force field where you have one with the shield and then you have to reflect the other one. I was like, I got the first shield and then I just assumed there was another one that you needed to find. Yeah. And I was like, where's the second one? Nope, you just got to block.
Golden fleece it.
Which I guess makes sense, but also I just totally didn't think about it. And then in that same area, for some reason it took me forever to realize that the thing where you we have the 2 pillars and you have to put one of the pillars on like an elevator thing and then roll the elevator up and then quickly go push the other pillar underneath the elevator thing so that it stops it. That like tripped me up for like 20 minutes last night. I could not. I was like, what am I missing here? Like, is there something larger in this room that I'm not seeing? That one tripped me up for a while. There was a couple strange ones in this game, more so than I remember from God of War 1 or Ascension that we've done so far. But in general, I mean, they were mostly pretty straightforward. But again, like some of the ones you guys mentioned, I had no issues with whatsoever. So, yeah.
That's interesting. What about, kind of related to puzzles here, that this slow down time mechanic? I thought it was interesting. This is kind of what I meant, Logan, in the Ascension episode where I said that Ascension felt like the cutting room floor of God of War 2 and God of War 3 and stuff, because that game also features a time mechanic, except it's reversing time. But quite often the time slowdown mechanic here in God of War 2 was the solution to a puzzle or a way to find a secret. What did you guys think about that?
Yeah, I felt like most of the time I was like, all right, there's a puzzle I need to do that involves time at some point. I know that towards the end of the game where you're in the room with the spikes that shoot up and you need to slow down time, or you need to rotate the thing, slow down time, then run over to the gate that I guess opened up. I had no idea that gate was there. For some reason, I spent like 10 minutes just rotating this thing, and I'm like, what am I doing? Where am I supposed to go? And then I look in the corner of my eye, that I'm like, oh, there's a gate here. I guess I need to go over there. But for the most part, I thought it was cool how they included, or how they was put into puzzles, but I didn't think it was a game changer or anything.
Yeah. Logan, is this a better time puzzle mechanic than Ascension?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I don't care for either of them, if I'm being totally honest. I didn't think it was too bad here, for the most part. The puzzle that Grant specifically mentioned, about the spikes at the end, that kind of tripped me up for a second as well. But yeah, I don't know. It was fine. It wasn't my favorite part of the game by any means. I know it was one of the big mechanics they look to use when it does come to the puzzles, but I didn't think it was too bad. It was probably better than Ascension, honestly.
Yeah, it definitely was.
I kind of wish it was in combat more.
Yeah, that would have been fun.
You can play some of the trials. They'll make you use it there.
They
if
do.
You haven't done that yet.
My one kind of real complaint about it, I agree with what you both have said about solving puzzles with it and stuff. It usually was the solution, which then kind of makes it a little easier. But my one qualm with it was mapped to L1 and R1, but L1's also block, or was it R1? I think it was L1. And so sometimes Kratos would just block, like it had missed the double press, and you wouldn't do. Sometimes you have to freeze time rather quickly so that you can, before, say, a character jumps off a ledge or some timer is counting down, like you want as much time as possible. And so I was a little frustrated that there wasn't an alternate, like they didn't figure out some other button combination for slowing down time, especially for a command that you do use frequently with the blocking. So I was a little bummed about that in particular. But
I learned that if you hold down block, you can still press R1. You don't have to double tap at the same time. So I started just because I ran into the same issue, because I would just press both and then it wouldn't register. If you held down L1 before and then you went R1, it usually worked.
Okay. I will remember that for my fourth playthrough eventually someday, because I definitely will come back to this at some point. The last kind of main bit of gameplay, I suppose, I think is the best part. This game actually has boss fights, which we mentioned earlier. The first game has 2. Well, technically 3, if you count the Hydra early on. But this game has so many boss fights, and they're with people that, if you're familiar with just basic Greek mythology, Theseus or Perseus, Icarus especially. Not that he's really a boss fight, you just kind of punch him as you fall. But obviously there's Zeus, and then there's the Sisters of Fate, all 3 of them. A Kraken, for whatever reason.
Yeah, where the heck does that come from? It just shows up.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's a boss fight, and it's there. It's cool. Logan. I mean, this is definitely the most boss fights we've seen so far in God of War. How do you feel about the increase here?
It's very good. It's probably one of my favorite aspects of the game, honestly, because most of the fights are pretty different from one another as well. I think that's what why it's successful with this many boss fights, is because each of them feels like they're doing at least a little bit something different. And they're not all the best. I forgot that the opening fight with the Colossus, or the statue, I forgot that I hate how that ends, where you have to go inside of the thing for a good 5 to 10 minutes. That's not my favorite. In a general sense, though, yeah, I think the boss fights are one of the standout aspects of the game. And I think it really helps with the pacing, honestly, because one felt pretty bogged down. There was nothing in between certain sections of God of War 1 that I really was... I don't know, it just felt too long. And this game, I feel is it's segmented by the boss fights, if that makes much sense, which leads to better pacing.
I think in God of War 1 that their bosses or breakups were just standard enemies, but when they'd introduce them for the first time, when they show Cerberus or the Satyrs or the Sirens, those are their boss fights.
Yeah.
But it's just standard enemies that you later encounter at a pretty regular pace. This was just cool. They really all were different in some way. Memorable. There was, Theseus with his magic and so many minotaurs. There was Perseus being invisible. Icarus, the falling and punching, which is just, its own thing. Obviously Zeus, Kraken, the sisters going back in time to the Ares fight, which just I've always liked that as just a cool, neat moment. And then obviously the big sister, with it being a puzzle and solving how to take her down. Grant, what did you think about the bosses in this game? Do they hold up this many years later?
Yeah, for the most part, all the bosses were spectacular in my opinion. I mean, the Sisters of Fate might be one of my favorite boss fights I've had. I mean, it just kind of you kind of use your entire arsenal you've been building up to, and I don't know why I like swinging around. So I thought it was an interesting boss fight, and I did feel like the end of the game. I don't know if y'all kind of ran into this too, but I just felt like it was like this long extended boss fight that took like an hour. You just move on from like boss fight to boss fight to boss fight. I just thought it was awesome. I mean, going into it, I didn't remember the game being about 11 hours it took me, but yeah, I mean, I played this game over a span of a couple weeks, and there's some boss fights I remember. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that happened. That was an awesome boss fight. Yeah, for the most part, even the Kraken one that came out of nowhere, I had a blast with that. It took me a little bit to realize I had to pick up the dead body and put it on the weight, but it was still cool as heck.
Yeah, I just that really, that final run of Kraken, sister, both sisters at the same time, big sister, and then obviously Zeus. That's
and
just
then even like in between, you have to run through that little gauntlet of like basically every enemy you've played against the entire game. That was awesome.
Yeah, they really nailed that final kind of stretch of bosses. I loved it. It's so cool. And it makes me really excited to play God of War 3, because what is God of War 3 if not just a boss gauntlet of the biggest and baddest Greek gods? I mean, it opens with the Poseidon fight. I mean, it's just, they really stepped up their boss pacing here, and I think that goes to great effect later on, and not just in God of War 3, but also 2018 and whatnot. How do you guys feel about how it looks? Again, it's dawned on me in this recording, since Grant kind of pointed it out. I mean, this game's almost 15 years old. It kind of makes me feel old, but how do you guys think this holds up so many years later? I mean, we all played the PS3 version, essentially. Is it better than the first one? Like, does this hold up, or do we need to, remake God of War 2 for it to be considered decent to look at?
I wish there wasn't a swamp level. That's
what you got against the swamp.
I've played all the Dark Souls games. That's what I have against swamps. Anytime a swamp shows up, I'm like, oh no, I've been here too many times. I think each area of the game, it just depends on the area. Like the opening stuff when you're in the city and fighting the Colossus, that all looks awesome. I think that all looks very good. But then there are some areas where it just feels like too many corridors, or just bland buildings and stuff like that, and structures. But then there are very cool ones, like the approach to the Fates area, I think, is very cool. The whole Fates area is actually really cool looking, I think, as a whole. Yeah, I don't know. There are some hits and misses depending on where you're at in the game, I think.
Yeah. Grant, what did you think about it?
For the most part, it looks, I'd say, sharp would probably be the best term to use. I mean, it is a PS2 game. There were some cutscenes where I'm like, this guy's face is really blurry, but for the most part, it looks pretty good. What the God of War games do really well is just like these giant set pieces where it's just a giant monster, or when you're like climbing Atlas and you're right by his ginormous face, some of that stuff just kind of takes you back. But there's still going to be some instances you run into where you're like, oh, this is blurry, or, I mean, it's a 15-year-old game. You're going to run into some stuff that doesn't hold up as well, but for the most part, God of War kind of shines when those super cool set pieces that you really don't find in a lot of other games.
Yeah, I do. I kind of marveled by the scale that it maintains. This still feels big. Atlas, or gosh, what's the first Titan in the icy cave? I'm blanking on his name, but that scale there, fighting the fingers
Yeah.
to free the Pegasus, flying around. Even Zeus, the final boss, has a phase where he becomes a giant. That they continue to keep this great sense of scale going in for Kratos and stuff. I think that's good and maintains it pretty well. But it looks good. I mean, it's good on PS3 at 60 frames. It's the same old, same old. It's the same treatment previously. I did think the CG cutscenes aged a little bit better.
Yes.
Than the PS1, or I'm sorry, the God of War 1 cutscenes.
For sure.
So big step up in that tech between those few years of development there, which is, I don't think we see that big of a jump in this stuff anymore so much in games. So it was interesting to see such a substantial leap in just a 2-year gap, essentially. I mean, good on them. They've definitely aged a lot better. I'm not sure. I feel like this has been a problem. I mean, a problem maybe is too harsh. But I feel like this has been a thing so far for us with God of War here, Logan. The music.
Yep, it's God of War.
It's more God of War, but it's better than Ascension. So good.
Yeah, probably.
I liked it. It's more memorable.
It's more it's more like bombastic, and I think plays better to the set pieces, but also there are just better set pieces in this game than Ascension, so I feel like there's more room for it to shine. Yeah, I don't know. Again, we talked a lot in the first season about like all the Paper Mario music and how there were certain tracks that always stood out to us a lot, and I felt like that was because music was far more of a core element of those games in more ways than just the background music. And here it's just a lot of background music primarily for the cutscene, with the cutscenes and the gameplay and all that, and not much else outside of that. So it's hard to really, I don't know. It's there. It's and that's not to diminish the work of anybody who worked on it, and it's not bad, but it's not a game where I'm gonna go, pop on the soundtrack on Spotify or something like that and listen to it while I work.
What do you think about the music, Grant?
Yeah, it's funny. I tried to do that exact thing where I put it on where I work today, and I was just, it's not I can work to music, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. If you told me a lot of it was just kind of like, not to sound harsh, but like stock Greek mythology music, I'd be like, okay, yeah. I mean, like none of this, I wouldn't be able to pinpoint like, oh yeah, that's a banger from God of War 2, where a lot of other games I can pinpoint, oh, this is from this exact game. I don't know. It's like you said, it's God of War music. It sounds like God of War music, but I wouldn't be able to listen to it and be like, God of War 2. I know that.
Yeah, it's so strange because it is, when it's on, I know it, and I will hum along while I'm playing, especially, the dun 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 dun, like that comes to me. But I wrote notes, like when I heard a song I liked, I wrote what was happening so I could remember to go look it up later when I'm editing the show. But I don't know the name of the song, and I can't recall it in my head right now. Where when we did Paper Mario, and I think The Last of Us is even easier just because of that music and the composer there. But I couldn't hum you. Like I wrote down Phoenix Firewall song, so that puzzle where the fire is being blown at you and you got to push the statue. Apparently I like the music then. I couldn't hum or sing for you right now what that sounded like then. I'd have to go back and listen to it. And I don't know if that, like, if every soundtrack needs to have that, but it's good,
That's fine. I think, not every soundtrack needs to be something like that. I think the music here fits very well with what you're doing and what this game is. I don't think it needs to be anything more. I don't think it needs to be a soundtrack that you're dying to throw your headphones on and listen to necessarily. That's totally fine.
Was there a song that sounded really familiar, or not familiar, but sounded a lot like Duel of the Fates from the prequels? There was one song, I forgot what part of the game, but I was like, this sounds exactly like the Duel of the Fates from the prequels. I don't know why. I'll send it to y'all after the podcast, but it was really weird.
I can't recall it, but if you can find it, let me know. Because I mean, everyone loves Duel of the Fates. It's one of the best parts of the prequels.
Oh, it's a banger.
So, to wrap up here, I mean, what's the legacy of this game? It's kind of multifaceted, I think. It's a very interesting point in the franchise. Logan, like, what do we got here?
The legacy of this game is that it's the game that Cory Barlog directed before the other one he directed. No. I still think front to back this one is just upper echelon of the series based on my memories. I think this is the best one we've played so far. I'm gonna guess the handheld ones I'm not gonna think are better. Nothing against those, and I haven't played those, but I know they're smaller in scope and nature. But yeah, I do think this is a very solid game, and I think this game justifies why we're doing this season sort of in the first place, and it better helps remind me of why people like this franchise, because yeah, coming out of the first one, I was pretty down on it. I really did not care for that game going back to it, and then Ascension was obviously not that great as well. So this was the first one that has really sort of made clear to me, yeah, just why people like these games, why this series is so critically acclaimed and stuff like that.
Grant, what do you think God of War 2's legacy is?
I mean, it does an excellent job leading up to God of War 3. I mean, in the scope of these games, I try to segment off 2018 one, but with this one, it's hard to beat God of War 3 when it's the entire game's like a boss run of killing off all of the Olympic gods. That's such a cool concept. It's hard to mess that up, and the scope of that game is so big. I mean, you start the game climbing a Titan, but for what this game is, as much as some of the narrative stuff didn't resonate with me at all, the game is so fun to play. And I mean, like, when there are a couple instances where I looked up a walkthrough or something where I needed to beat the game, so I need to find how to do a puzzle or whatever. I mean, the game, there might be a day where I'm like, I can get through this game in 4.5 hours. Let's just run through it real quick. You know, the game, I think for the most part, the combat and puzzles shine so well that, I mean, this game is in the upper echelon of PS2 games and also God of War games. You know, it's definitely, I don't know if it beats 3 or the reboot, but it's up there.
Yeah. I always just remember this being one of my favorites on the series before 2018 came out. It would be between this and Ghost of Sparta, which I'm actually really excited to replay it myself because I've only played it once, and I'm excited to see what you think of it, Logan. But this game always just felt like it stood out more than the core other games, God of War 1 and God of War 3. On some level, God of War 1 and 3 feel like the same game in the sense that your goal is to kill one particular person. God of War 3 expands that to kill a set of people, but 2 feels the most like vengeance, truly. It is, you are betrayed in the opening minutes of the game, and you actually have a real drive to extract your vengeance. And 3 is just a continuation of that same story, and it pulls it off well. And Logan, like you said, God of War 1 is really kind of righting your own mistake. He kind of he made his bed and didn't want to lie in it anymore, so he's getting up to make a new bed. And and maybe it's because I was so into God of War at the time. Like I said at the top of the show, I bought 3 of these games on one day. Like I clearly was and still am the target sort of audience for these games. And I think this holds up quite well for, even in the hindsight of the reimagining, this game is a titan within its own series. And for the PS2 itself, I mean, the power that they were able to pull out of that PS2 at the end of its own life, I think is astounding. Santa Monica really knows their stuff and can get the most out of PlayStation's own hardware. Maybe they didn't do that so much with God of War 3, but they certainly have did that with the PS2. And obviously, like you said, Logan, really, this game is remembered as Cory Barlog's first God of War game. And I think it's pretty cool that this is how he started. And it's kind of like it only can, you can go up or you can go down from here. And thankfully, he goes up. So I'm excited to see where that goes here in the future of our season. But as for this episode, I'm going to call it wraps there on God of War 2. Thank you for listening to this episode of Chapter Select. Grant, why don't you tell the people where they can find you online?
I'm sometimes on Twitter. I don't tweet much, but I'm at the _ Grantula21 if anyone wants to see me not tweet.
You can find Logan over on Twitter at moreman12 and his writing at comicbook.com. And then you can find myself over on Twitter at maxroberts143 and my writing over at maxfrequency.net. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Chapter Select, where we just basically tweet out the show notes and stuff. And you can check out the show at chapterselect.com. Join us next time in 2 weeks here for God of War Ghost of Sparta. That's our next game, and I'm so excited to dig into it. So thank you all for listening. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Adios. Chapter Select is a Max Frequency production. This episode was research, produced, and edited by me, Max Roberts. Season 2 is hosted by Logan Moore and myself, and it's all about God of War. For more on this season, go to chapterselect.com/season 2. To check out previous seasons, go to chapterselect.com.